Need a search engine optimization SEO services? Then get in touch with our professional and friendly team to learn more about our range of custom and tailored services designed to suit your exact needs. Every one of our professionals have acquired years of experience, which ensures you get the very best. Our experienced staff is waiting to hear from you and to answer any specific questions that you may have on how we can meet your needs. Just ask for a consultation and let us prove our commitment to you as we promise to maintain the highest level of quality and commitment. Your satisfaction is our prime concern. So please, don't hesitate to get in contact with us and let us show you all the great options we have.
And we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the worldwide Coalition Radio Network at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio, and of course the mothership at coalitionradio.us and coalitionradionetwork.com. Well, joining us tonight is someone now we can officially appoint to the level of being a frequent offender here on the Coalition, which means that you've been here more than twice, which displays some lack of common sense, but hey, we'll go with it. You know, it's interesting. Across civil life, if you will, here in Rhode Island, the state is so close that one advantage is that folks who might be considered to be on different sides of the political aisle or the political spectrum often have so much in common that our closeness as a community and really as sort of an extended family allow us to meet, get to know each other, and really understand what each individual is trying to accomplish with their activism and their political activity. And I think no better example of that is our next guest. Nick Williams is joining us. He is an agent with the Teamsters, International Brotherhood Teamsters, 251. He represents, amongst many other folks, bus drivers throughout Rhode Island. And I want to wish you a warm Coalition welcome. Welcome back to the show, Nick.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, it's
good to be here.
You were on a couple years ago about similar issues, and one of the things that we try to do here at the show is get past the generalizations and the cliches, and you know, and actually, you know, the saying has always been truth to power, but really knock out the BS and really get an understanding of what different folks are experiencing in their lives here in Rhode Island. So let's first talk about the Teamsters in general. How long has this chapter been around, and just what you represent a very broad spectrum of workers across the state. Give us a little background about the individual chapter and who you work with.
Yep. So I'm with Teamsters Local 251. I believe, you caught me on that one. It was established in the early 1900s. I don't have an exact date for you. Mm-hmm. But we're a general local, which means we're not, you know, back in the day it was the Teamsters were the two horses that pulled the carry, you know, the carriage there that had all the freight on it. This was before we invented vehicles, and that's what the Teamsters are. And the two horses that you can see my picture there are Thunder and Lightning. That's their names, actually. It's their official names. And basically, what we did back in the day was just we would represent those drivers that had to, you know, sit there and get muddled from Providence to Boston with two horses taking them, and made sure that they had brakes and made sure that they were paid correctly and they were treated right, because the freight was more of a commodity than the driver back in those days. And you know, throughout the years, we fought hard for those people, and you know, now the driver is the most important commodity, which is the way it should be. So that's where we started out, but we kind of branched off just from the trucking industry, and we became a general local, which means we cover just about every industry. Actually, believe it or not, our biggest, we call them barns, is Rhode Island Hospital, where we have 2,500 members over there. We also cover UPS. That's across the entire United States and Canada. But what I do is a little more specialized. I handle all the public sector that we deal with, all the public sector contracts or contracts that are related in some way to public sector, such as busing, which is a vendor of a public sector entity. So that's my specialization here at the Teamsters Local 251.
Now, it's fascinating. I grew up in an Irish Catholic family in the 60s and 70s in New Jersey. My father was a member of the American Postal Workers Union, and then left and joined as sort of an independent, very fiery union. Actually, interesting at the time, it was largely minority based as they broke away from the APWU. I don't know if many people here understand the concept of a wildcat strike, but a wildcat strike back in the 70s, 80s, that was a fearsome term. That meant an individual local got together and said, you know what, we have an issue here, and we have a failure to communicate, and as a result, we're just going to walk. And you had these dramatic pictures of the shop steward and the agent leading people off the shop floor. Very often, it was very much manufacturing oriented at the time, and folks had to what's the Rhode Island term? Come cocoa, as the late great Vincent A. Buddy Cianci would say.
Yeah.
So,
and the reason for that is, this is a contract between two entities. Our end of the bargain, we have an end of that bargain that we're going to provide you with 8 hours worth of labor, and then the rest of the contract is the agreement between the parties. So if you're not fulfilling your end, why should we fulfill ours? That's basically where it stands. Where if you're not, following the contract on your end of it, we're not going to follow it on ours, and we're going to, take that 8 hours of labor away from you until we figure this thing out. Those wildcats usually end up with a business agent in jail, but if it's a good enough reason, most of us will take the day off, right, so to speak.
Well, and it stems from one simple fact. And again, I'm fortunate that my father's union actually completely upended the relationship between the United States Post Office, who is the ultimate example of do as I say, not as I do, one of the least safe workplaces in America. And if not for that, quite frankly, my family would have been poor. And yet my father, who's with us, he's 97, worked very, very hard. Oh, wow. And I might add that he is still a recipient of the pension. He is one of those rare cases where he may live longer than the time he worked. So somewhere our president is in agony over my father.
Your father's living the American dream as I see it.
Right, absolutely. But the larger question always rests. Nick, you've been doing this for a few years. How often do people do things simply because they're the right thing in American business?
I got to tell you, if you asked me this question 4 months ago, I would say rarely. But when this COVID pandemic hit, I got to say that about 90% of the entities that I work with did the right thing, and that surprised the hell out of me. But the 10% that didn't took up 100% of my time. But it depends on the situation. I would say normally, if they can save a buck, they'll do it. But when it comes to, I found out, during this pandemic, when it comes to safety, that's a completely different ball game for a lot of these companies. So they've come a long way.
Well, that
in the public sector. Anyway.
Well, no, and that's heartening to hear. But ultimately, I've always been frustrated, and you and I have joked about this a couple of times, that, I'm a capitalist, and I see trade organizations as an extension of capitalism. And somewhere, one of my Republican friends literally just drove off a bridge. But it ultimately, if banks are able to coalesce and coordinate activity and come together to gain economies of scale and clout in the marketplace, that's usually considered a good thing. And Wall Street cheers. And when the big raw materials, big steel or big copper or the car companies find economies of scale and market efficiencies by joining together, that's applauded. The stocks rise and America is happy. Why do you think in this time, in the year 2020, so many Americans, and I look back at the Stop and Shop strike as a great example, so many Americans seem to really resent the fact that folks come together, organize, simply to achieve a better life? What happened?
Well, I mean, I think a lot of it, if you're looking at the Wall Street end of it, is, hey, that's not your money, that's ours. Who are you to take our money away from us, when it comes to returns to the company? But, labor is entitled to all it creates, in my opinion. So you got to pay the labor that creates the profit for you. But every bit that we get is a bit that they don't. So on that end, I understand the argument. But there are some things, like you said, with that strike with Stop and Shop, where people are like, oh, just go back to work. And, I never understood that. It's a level of ignorance that I'll never understand. If that person, you know, had a problem at their job or whatever it was, they'd be asking for help. They'd be asking for people to, you know, come up to their side and understand the problem and try to work it out. And this is exactly what they were doing at Stop and Shop. There was a problem, you know, they couldn't come to an agreement, and they were trying to work it out. But I think there's a lot of, you know, we have a term here at the Teamsters, and it's called a meester. And that's when something affects me and I don't care about the group. Now I'm angry. And I think a lot of it was that, because people couldn't go shopping. Right. They wanted to go shopping. They pull in the parking lot. They'd see us out there with the signs and just throw their hands up in the air, turn around. Oh, now I got to go somewhere else. So I mean, I don't know how much of it is the, you know, people getting angry that we're fighting for something that they don't have, as much as how is that going to inconvenience me, right? Because we've held strikes before. We held one at DHL that lasted 6 months. Barely made the news, to be honest with you. Nobody knew about it. But as soon as we pulled those bus drivers in Providence, the entire world was involved at that point, and you couldn't get away from it. So it all depends on how it affects the individual and the community. I think it will directly dictate the action that they take.
Right. No,
some of it supports, some of it is you know, they're pissed because they're inconvenienced.
And there's another important role for a union that I think is largely unknown / ignored. In the workplace, particularly in a manufacturing environment where there's repetitive labor, where there are stressful environments, which, by the way, describes most offices too, right? But in the workplace, one, I believe firmly that one should really never represent themselves before their boss, because then it becomes personal. The beauty of having a shop steward is that you go to the shop steward with your issue. The shop stewards that I've met in my life are pretty blunt individuals. They'll tell you, you know, shut up and go back to your desk if they think you're full of nonsense. All right. But at the same time, if it's a legitimate grief, the shop steward as an individual is sort of like your lawyer, your rabbi, your priest. They take the complaint up, and it's not personal, which means there's resolution. How important is that?
Oh, that's extremely important. I mean, organization on the shop floor is where it's at, because as a business agent, I administer and enforce the contract. I have no relationship with the company at all. They can't fire me. They can't discipline me. They can hate me all they want, but I'm still here. But as far as, you know, the workers, they get concerned. I don't want them to, you know, I don't want the boss, I don't want to file this grievance because the boss is going to, no, that's not even a part of it, because the steward's job on the shop floor is to defend the contract and uphold the contract, which is a legal binding document, which gives them an out to say, hey, not personal. This is a legal binding document that you're a party to and you agreed to, and X and Y has to happen next. And they have that footing. And they are, when they are in that office arguing for the contract, they are on an equal level with that supervisor. Now, after that meeting, obviously, we go to an employer-servant relationship type of thing, where they can make their lives a living hell. That's illegal. We'll definitely file unfair labor practices about it. But that's where I come in, because I can't be fired. I can't be disciplined. And if it gets to that level in the grievance procedure where I'm coming in, it changes the ball game a little bit, because a lot of companies will try to fight with the steward and wear them out. But here at the Teamsters, we have great stewards, and many have tried and many have failed to wear out our stewards. So, but they are the first contact. They're the most important members. And I'll tell you, I did it for about 7 years at Rhode Island Hospital. It is a thankless job. There's no extra money involved. You do it for the love of your union and to the betterment of your coworkers. Mostly to your detriment. So they're the most important people. They're the unsung heroes of the union, without question.
Right, and by establishing that level of respect and by having that relationship in place, I've got to believe, and I appreciate the fact that you walked in here, as you did before, with such a positive attitude, but it sets the stage for when there are trials and tribulations. It sets the stage when there are conflicts. It sets the stage when there is tragedy. The relationship is in place. It's recognized. There are channels of communication. And hopefully, in situations like we've run into in the last few months, it helps to mitigate the damage that can be done to so many people in the workplace and just as importantly, to the business. It establishes a partnership where, sometimes without structure, partnerships can kind of come and go and ebb and flow, don't they?
Absolutely, yeah.
Is what would you say is the state of unionization in the state? I mean, here in Rhode Island, in terms of particularly in the private marketplace, are you fighting?
I think in Rhode Island we're lucky. We have some pretty strong unions here in Rhode Island. We are not a right to work state. And your options are either join a union or you're an at-will employee, which is night and day. So, I think we're lucky here in Rhode Island to have strong unions, strong union leadership, and some people up at the State House that understand, what that at-will employment could lead to. If not for unions. So in this state, I think we're doing okay. We could be a lot better. There are a lot of places that reach out to us all the time to organize because they're not being treated fairly. And a friend of mine actually, who owns a construction company, called me the other day, and it was about a month ago, and he told me, "Hey, listen, there's this carpenters union that's knocking around, talking to my guys." I said, "What should I do?" I said, "Well, the best anti-union policy in the world is treat your people right. What are you doing? Do you cut their brakes? What'd you do?" And it turns out that he cut their pay. Now here comes the union, So if more companies treated their people right, there wouldn't be a need for the unionization. But I mean, in this day and age, absolutely. I mean, it's just cutthroat out there. And people have the right to earn a living, and we're here to defend that.
Right. And in the free market, folks have a right to fight for and compete with their own pricing, if you will, their own personal pricing, just as if they were selling a product. Because ultimately, in the case of IB 251, the product is the people, and that's what you got. That's what you got to work with, and you're going to leverage economic situations in the same manner that the guy who is selling copper, or the guy who is selling fittings, or the guy who's selling that magical widget that exists somewhere. If times are good and the demand is high, they're going to try and get more money. And the same damn thing should be available to labor. You're entitled to worth what you can get. So I wanted to set the stage for that because it's an issue that I obviously feel very, very strongly about. Now, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, Nick.
Sure.
All right, and this is kind of a personal question. What are the most important things in your life?
My family, my God, and my union.
Yeah.
My wife and my kids.
All right.
Number one.
And your children are, I don't want to get personal here, but your children are younger?
Yeah, they're 10 and 5.
All right.
7, I'm sorry. Good Lord, 7.
So to whom, the setup here is pretty obvious. As I like to say, I telegraph my questions more than Drew Bledsoe did on a midfield crossing pattern. But, but on a serious note, outside of your wife and your immediate family, to whom do you entrust your children a significant part of the year? Literally, probably every day?
Every single day, to a bus driver and a monitor. Absolutely.
So we've got a situation here, and I wanted to bring this up because I want to talk about, and I do this from time to time, where I want to talk about people who have seemingly, I don't want to say ordinary jobs, but jobs that are sort of part of the fabric of life. You see a bus driver, you see a monitor. You may know them, very often if they're doing the little kids, it's Miss Marie or Miss Susan or Mr. George or something like that. It's cute, it's adorable. But at the same time, we need as a society to understand the challenges that individual jobs face. And one of the things, if there's a common denominator amongst the type of jobs that a Teamster union or some of the unions will represent, is sort of those really challenging, hard, everyday, bang it out, lots of responsibility, pressure kind of jobs. And it could be in the hospital or it could be in the front of a school bus driving down 138. What's involved in becoming, first of all, even becoming a school bus driver?
Well, in Rhode Island, we have a higher bar than a lot of other states in that we have to get what's called a white card, which is a certificate of health and, that you're able to do the job. But the bus driver has to have a clean record, number one, drug and alcohol free, obviously. They have to have a CDL Class B, which is another requirement. And I'll tell you, it's not in the books. It's not written down anywhere, but it takes a very, very special person to be a bus driver. I've been working with them for the past, 7, 8 years. And I'm amazed by some of the stories that I hear from them and the things that they do for the community and for the kids and for individuals and things that teachers, don't even do. So it takes a very special individual. And these drivers will always put those kids before themselves every time without question. And the ones that aren't willing to do that don't last. But I have some of my drivers that I know are listening right now that are 15, 20-year drivers running the same route that they started out with. They could go on to another route and make more money, but they want to stay with what they call their kids. They literally call them their kids because that's how much love there is and admiration for their job. So that's what it takes to be a bus driver as far as, a legal requirement and from a personality perspective.
Right. And typically it's also a challenging day. I mean, right now I think we've all gotten a little bit spoiled here. You don't have the 5-mile backups running past the white church. You don't have, Route 6 being bumper to bumper to bumper to bumper. You don't have, I-195 coming. It's a very different world, but it was just a few months ago. How difficult is it to drive one of these buses, and how many kids do you have on them, and just how exhausting is it just to work the bus, the route, and the type of traffic and chaos that represents daily Rhode Island?
Yeah, so I can tell you that I've never driven a bus. I am not cut out for it. I'll tell you that right out. And I could not do it. These people are unbelievable in that aspect. But obviously, they stop every few minutes to pick up a kid. There's people behind them that are late for work, honking. People blowing by that stop sign, which drives me nuts. It should drive the entire community nuts because there could be a kid crossing that road that you could kill. But I got to say, they get up every morning and they run their route perfectly every time. They don't let that pressure get to them. But there is a lot of pressure. I can only imagine. I mean, I have, like I said, two younger kids, and I have an 18-year-old who's on his own now. But my 2 younger kids just driving from here to Target, yelling and screaming, and they're fighting. And I can only imagine what 72 kids, which is, I believe, the capacity of the bigger buses. And, they're packed, too, because these the school committees hire the bus driving company to come in and route the runs so that they save them the most money. So if every bus that you run is an extra, exponential amount of money as you get on. So if you can fit 72 kids on one bus, you're doing it. And that's what they do. And so these buses are completely full for the most part, unless it's a private school or a ride run or something to that effect. But for the most part, the in-school runs they're packed. There's 72 kids and numerous stops. And, you rarely hear about a bus driver breaking the law, even speeding. If a bus driver was even caught speeding, it would make the news, and you never hear about them. You notice that, Pat? You never hear about them because they're doing their job and they're doing it well.
And the safety record here in Rhode Island is remarkable. Again, all the challenges. These are I've driven trucks. The largest truck I've ever driven was 32 footer. I used to drive it once every week or so down from Rhode Island into New York City. That's a whole nother trip, let me tell you. So I have profound admiration who can
Connecticut.
Right, because not only are you dealing with the physical skills and the touch necessary to drive your vehicle, let's look at each other in the mirror right now. Are Rhode Islanders challenged drivers, maybe? Do we all text and drive? So here's the...
You know what?
Yikes.
Yeah, no. Well, it's funny you say that because before I, got into the unit to be a business agent out of college, I had a technical background and I worked for USAREC, which is the Army Recruiting Stations. And what I would do is go to each one of them throughout the country. On the Eastern Seaboard was where I was assigned to, and I would install wireless DSLs, right? And every other state, it seems like in the Union, there is 3 lanes on the highway, and they are called the exit lane, the travel lane, and the passing lane. But here in Rhode Island, we call it the high-speed lane. I don't think we have a name for the middle lane, and then the slow lane. So, yeah, it kind of how we drive as people, I think, it's horrible. It's ridiculous.
So you're talking.
I wouldn't be able to do it in a 70, say buses, as big as they have there, or a tractor trailer. I always yield for them out of pity.
No, and so you're talking about an individual with a preposterously large vehicle whose turning radius is something along the lines of an aircraft carrier, who's taking 70 kids of a variety of behavioral traits at any one moment, through traffic, through ignorant drivers, and yet again, I want to stress, in the age of the post-monitor law, there was a tragedy years ago which led to the creation of the monitor's position. The safety record. Listen, I'm not here to cast stones at anyone else, but we all understand that our state busing could learn, and if our state busing had the safety record of our regular folks' record, it would be a lot better state. So I wanted to put that out there. I wanted to put that out there because ultimately, I look at a job like that, and I don't want to say people dismiss it. I just don't think they really think about it. And I think that unless they've had a direct interaction, maybe the handoff of a sobbing child, or perhaps a conversation about some behavior that might be going on in the bus. So many people go through their entire experience without thinking that these are regular folks with regular pressures who are put into an extraordinary position of responsibility every day, with the youngest amongst us under great duress and great physical challenges. And I just think it's important as we go into this period, and we're going to get into the politics of this, obviously, as we go into this period in the summer, where we understand that exactly what we're dealing with. These are not notches on a spreadsheet.
No, they're consummate professional.
Right, and our children should not be considered under the guise of of a number on a spreadsheet.
I agree.
So let's talk about what's been happening. I'm not a Bristolian. I don't live in Warren. I live in North Cumberland. My children are out of those years by a couple of years now. It's not something I have it's not something I have to deal with per se, but we've got a lot of communication issues here in this state. So let's start with Bristol and Warren. I first have to point out that the drivers, and I don't know if this was done elsewhere in the state. I only know about the Bristol situation. The drivers and some of the monitors got together with, I believe, under the auspice of the union, and did this amazing little video. It was about a 4-minute video, and it was purely a labor of love. And we put it up on the internet, and it's all sorts of people are watching it because it really put on display the affection, the love that these drivers have for their young charges every day. And I did it for two reasons. Number one, because it was just great to watch. Number two, astonishingly enough, according to all the reports that I've been able to get, the union submitted this video to the school board or to the school system, and nothing was done with it. I mean,
I just got to give a quick correction there. I'd love to take the credit for that, but there was actually the company that worked with the drivers to put that video together. We just shared it on Facebook, but I got to give credit where it's due. It was a company and the drivers and the monitors who are not Teamsters, they're laborers, but they're our brothers and sisters in labor. And I have spoken with their business agent, and he's 100% on board with what I'm saying here today.
Okay. All right, cool. But
and nothing was done with it. It is a tragedy, though. I agree with you. I cannot believe that they didn't share it. And there's got to be a reason why, right?
If you wanted something to make you feel good in otherwise crappy, terrible circumstances, there's this simple little video. If it doesn't put a smile on your face, you're simply not a human being. And I bring that up because that's really the symptom, if you will, to an issue that looms large. It's about 70 days to the school year. Yeah, I just said that, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere some little child just bolted up and said, "What? I'm going back to school when?" But it's true. There's only about if school is starting August 31st, folks, we're halfway into into June. So rumors have been floating this past week, allegedly lifted up in one of these Zoom conference meetings, where people made remarks that were, sort of off the cuff, not in confidence, off the cuff. Sometimes when you do these meetings, you speak publicly, you realize it's that last thing you add is just kind of to throw out there that is the one that usually gets you in trouble. So, and the notion is, of course, is that that there is going to be, in part, it's being defined by social distancing issues, but that there's going to be dramatic changes in the ability to use transportation afforded by the school district and the various municipalities and cities, to get their students to school, particularly in Bristol Warren. So I felt it important that somebody, I don't know, is somewhere out there, just reach out to people who are subject matter experts, and let's talk about that. First of all, the first and obvious question, and now, as it were, our governor decided to make to speechify again today, as we say on the Coast Coalition, and she threw out her own bombshells. So, what from as the duly elected, if you will, chosen representative of the people who are actually going to have to respond and adapt to these changes, and I know are going to do so with professionally, seemingly no matter whatever curveball they're thrown. What's the deal? What's going on here, buddy?
Well, I mean, from what I understand, and I haven't seen the Zoom call, but from what I understand, the superintendent in Bristol Warren, Dr. Bryce, during that call, that I don't know how or why, and under what auspice, but he had mentioned that the parents should prepare for the possibility of there being no buses, there being no transportation to schools in Bristol Warren, which is a bomb to drop. I mean, you don't say that unless you know. I mean, it's like it caused a huge uproar, obviously, among my drivers and the monitors and the laborers as well. And, we want to know what's going on. And I can only imagine how the parents feel about that. Like I said, there's got to be a reason why he would say that. So it came a little bit clear to me today when I heard the governor's, when I read through the governor's return to school in August presentation today, and I was looking for the part that dealt with busing, because a lot of it was geared toward education. That's a big part, but you got to get the kids there first. So step one, get kids there. Step two, all the crap that was in that thing she released today. So it seems like they're skipping step one completely. And when questioned about it, one of her aides actually said that, well, busing is going to be a challenge, but we're, good Lord, they may have to just hire more buses. Well, I mean, that's easy to say, but the school committees are strapped. Their budget is completely strapped. And adding a new bus is not cheap. And the way that the CDC guidelines have it are, by my math, it's about, the only way you could do it safely is 22 children on the bus, right? That's the first problem. We went from 72 to 22. Now we need 3 buses to every one, which is 3 times the cost of transportation. And I can understand why now Dr. Bryce said what he said, because they don't have that money. I guarantee it that they don't have the money. But I'm hoping that, from what I understand, there's going to be some federal money coming in to cover any COVID-related costs. I just hope it trickles down to the school department in that sense. But a lot of the CDC guidelines for returning to school are built in a world that doesn't exist. And I'll tell you, Pat, it's the same reason that we don't have seatbelts on school buses. Because who is going to enforce that rule? So the same thing with children must be wearing masks. Well, what if he takes it off? The monitor can't touch the child. The driver can't touch a child. They're driving the bus. Who's going to make sure that kid keeps his mask on? So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are in that return to school that I have to question. I don't understand how they expect this to just happen. And it really needs to be looked at.
So this announcement was made, I mean, and I know some of these questions are kind of putting you on the spot. I mean, this is a rapidly evolving situation.
Yeah.
But my thought would have been, and And how many? Something maybe I should have asked in the ramp up to the show. But how many different school bus drivers districts, if you will, are represented by Teamsters and/or other unions? I mean, do Teamsters cover a variety?
Yeah, we have a few. So we cover first student yard in Portsmouth, the first student yard in Warren. They're competitive Ocean State Transit in South Kingston. We also have First Student Providence, which is our biggest bus yard, the mechanics over there as well, and then the drivers in Pawtucket and Ocean State Transit in Coventry with the drivers and the monitors. But as far as other unions, the SEIU has a few yards, the laborers have the bus drivers in Cranston. There's the ATU, American Amalgamated Transit Union, that has a few yards as well. So a good portion of Rhode Island bus drivers are unionized. But there are a few stragglers.
Right. So I'm not going to ask you to speak, obviously, for other districts that aren't part of the Teamsters 251 purview, but is it fair to say, and I'll just make this in the abstract, a question, is it fair to say that 251 and the drivers they represent are stakeholders in this entire process, aren't they?
Oh, absolutely. Without question.
All right.
Yes.
So how do we get to this point in time? Because the governor, and again, I'm not asking you to bash the governor, I'm not asking you to be politicized about this. I'm just going to throw some generic statements out there. The governor, if you listen to one of these press conferences every day, as I have to, oh my, are you old enough to remember? Again, this is me saying this. Are you old enough to remember the Carol Burnett show? All right.
I do remember the Carol Burnett show.
All right. On the Carol Burnett show.
Reruns. No. Right. Reruns. I'm not going to date myself.
Okay. I am. All right. So on the Carol Burnett show, they had this running skit, and it was a takeoff on soap operas, and she called it As the Stomach Turns. And that is my terminology for these daily press conferences, because every day there's another resolution. But to the point here is, how did we get to June 10th and not have active stakeholder involvement from the professional transportation community, a community which, by the way, my understanding is every year has to work almost overtime to staff properly given the current demands. I mean, you as you can imagine, despite how great your people are, there are constant challenges finding the right people who have the right qualifications and the right skill sets. So if you're going to triple or quadruple the potential workforce, how could they not have involved you at some point?
Yeah, well, I mean, we've been a part of the conversation through the AFL-CIO, but it's the communication has to be with the driver. There's got to be some input from the drivers and the monitors that do the job every single day. Their input is so much more valuable than mine, because, like I said, I've never driven a bus, and the fact that there's been no town hall or any kind of way to get that information to the decision makers, it's disconcerting, to say the least. I don't want to bash the governor either, because I don't envy her position at all during this pandemic, and God bless her for making the decisions that she's made. But yeah, there's got to be some on-the-ground discussion with the people doing the work that needs to be done, because, I mean, you come up with a resolution and they'll poke 10 holes in it, because every single day, they know what their laws are. They know what their job is. They know what they can and can't do. They know what's practical and not practical. Something that may seem like a good idea, they'll tell you 10 different reasons why it's not. For instance, seatbelts on school buses. You talk to a bus driver about that. Even if you're for it, it'll change your mind at the end, because they're the ones that are doing it. So they see kids whipping each other with buckles and all the other stuff that happens, choking each other and all the things that nobody thinks about. So I mean, yeah, there's got to be that discussion with the actual people doing the work. I don't know if or when that's going to happen. I can tell you, after what I heard today, the first call I made was to my boss, that we got to get in a room with them and we got to figure this out, because you can't skip step one. You can't get the kids to school and then talk about how the education and the classes are going to go. I mean, the bigger conversation here is, how do we get them there safely?
Right.
And it seems like it was glossed over, which makes me very nervous for what's going to happen over the next couple of months.
Right. Because we've seen.
And yep.
No, go ahead, buddy.
So I was just going to say that you touched on a very important point there, in that we've had a nationwide bus driver shortage, and that I mean, in a lot of other states, you don't need that white card, you don't need that extra step to be certified as a driver. Here in Rhode Island, it's built into the law that you have to have that card in order to drive a bus. So you can't take a truck driver or even somebody working a city bus and put them in a seat of a school bus legally. You can't do it. They have to be certified with that white card in order to drive the kids around. So we have an extra shortage here in Rhode Island of drivers. And I don't know, we're gonna get 3 to 1. That's not happening. They're gonna have to run around the town about 4 or 5 times with the same bus and the same driver and the same monitor. That's the only way I can see it getting done.
Right. We've had a couple of situations in across the state in the last couple of years where school districts have tried to change starting times. I think a lot of the efforts were with the student in mind. There's all sorts of studies about how young people are early in the morning. There's a sense in some school districts that the transportation is so challenging, just moving all these kids every morning from a variety of parts of town across town. It's this gigantic jigsaw puzzle that, it almost begs disbelief. And so when those arrival times changed to accommodate a later start time, there were a lot of challenges, and this was by well-intentioned people. I mean, this wasn't something that worked very well at all. And you've got the
well, there's a few areas that did, but no, I understand. Yep.
Yeah, and you've also got to account for the fact that you've got a lot of single-parent households, excuse me,
Yep.
and those that are two-parent households or two-partner households. Very often they're working multiple jobs to get by here in Rhode Island.
Yeah.
What's your suggestion? What do you think needs to happen? Just as a reaction to all this late breaking news today.
Well, I mean, I think, like I said, we need to get the input from the bus drivers and the monitors. That's what I think is the key here, because I know that, what you had spoken about with the latest starting times, it was a lifesaver in the town of South Kingston, which has about 750 year-round residents and 1 million roads. But in a town like Warren or Bristol, where there's 2 main roads, and they are clogged from 7 a.m. until 10 a.m., and you got every bus out there, it's not an easy thing to coordinate, and the drivers know what the roads are like. They know what the traffic is going to be like on any given day. They're out there. They're doing the work. I guarantee you, if they were to call in, they would give you 10 ideas right now on how this could be done, because that's all they're thinking about right now. And I hear it from a lot of my different drivers. Once school committee meetings start up again, I might be on, setting my schedule to hit every single one of them with one of my drivers so that they can speak during public comment and explain to them, what their ideas are. That might be the route we have to take. Mm-hmm. But you have to get their opinion on it. It's just such a valuable opinion, and they need to be heard. And I'm going to make sure that they are one way or the other. We got sprung all that information today, so I haven't had much time to work on it. But that's my plan, is to make sure that my drivers are heard and that their opinions are taken into consideration.
Well, and we got just a couple of minutes left, and if you're just joining us, Nick Williams has been kind enough to join us. He is the agent for the International Brotherhood of Teamsters, Local 251. He is responsible for managing, if you will, the overall picture regarding drivers and how they work with and how they work around, and sometimes how they have to work in spite of the best efforts of school districts, municipalities, and sometimes sort of the denial that goes into just throwing out these working conditions to folks who are charged with arguably the most important people in our community. The youngest amongst us are our children. Mm-hmm. Take a moment, if you will, because I know we got a lot of drivers who are listening. They're in the comments already. Yep. They've got a lot of suggestions, and I've gotten to know a few of them over the last few days. Take a moment to talk directly to them. They may hear it now, they may hear it later or tomorrow. But what would you like to say if you had them in a union hall right now? What would you say to them?
Well, I've been digesting what the governor has put out there. Getting you guys back to work is my number one priority right now. Most of the other industries that I deal with are already back safely through, that took an act of God to get that kind of behind me. And going forward, you guys are the ones that are left. You're my main worry. You're my main concern. What I heard today, I'm not going to lie to you, I don't like it. And I'm going to do everything in my power to change it. And like I said, I want to get your voice heard. So there may be some Zoom meetings coming up or conference calls or something like that with the elected leadership that you guys have down there. And in Warren, we have the committee, the negotiating committee. So we're going to set up a couple meetings there and just kind of figure out exactly what you want to tell the governor. What do you want to be heard about? And we're going to make it happen one way or the other. Even if we have to protest down the city, down to the state house, your voice is going to be heard on this because it's the most important voice in this conversation. So, and I'm going to make sure it happens.
Well, Nick, I want to thank you for joining us tonight on such short notice with so much going on. Feel free to use us here as a pulpit to across the state because I think you know where our hearts are. And again, I just want to congratulate the drivers, the monitors, and the entire system for doing a remarkable job on a daily basis. And I think this is one of the, I'll leave you with this thought. A lot of time has been spent over the last few months reflecting on the value of nurses aides, folks who work in hospitals, first responders, and it's certainly well placed. There's folks who've done remarkable jobs in literally saving lives throughout this crisis. I think it might be appropriate time, and I'm not saying guys don't do this all the time, but maybe to the public, I think it's time as we go into a challenging fall where everyone, I hope hearts are in the right place, that we recognize people in the community, in the school systems, who are going to have to absorb this incredible challenge. These new rules, there always is chaos in the beginning. I mean, that's just part of the game. We know it's going to be a little chaotic in the beginning, but if the right folks are given the right opportunity to have input and manage the situation in a spirit of cooperation, as opposed to being handed a dictate, if that happens, we are successful. And I think we need to celebrate the people in those school districts, like school bus drivers and monitors, who really contribute so much to our daily life. And very often, I don't think it's out of malice. I think it's just they're part of the fabric of our community. We see them. Maybe it's time to reflect on their contributions. How's that sound?
Yeah, that sounds great. Absolutely. They are they're the unsung heroes of the educational system. They're the first the human being that your child sees in their educational experience, and they're the last one they see when they drop them off on that final day of school. So they're extremely important. They're underappreciated for the most part. And that reminds me that actually my steward in Warren was all over me to get a bus driver appreciation day. Put through the legislation, and then COVID hit. But I haven't forgotten about that, and there will be a bus driver appreciation day or a bus driver and monitor appreciation day here in Rhode Island before the year is out. So we've got to. I haven't forgotten. I just want to let them know that.
Excellent.
But I also want to say that I'm a good friend of mine, Arthur Jordan, is the business agent for the laborers who represents the monitors, and him and I have been in close discussions back and forth on this issue, and he's right on board with us, and he's going to be there for his monitors. I'm going to be there for the drivers, and we're going to get this done together.
Excellent. And folks, we've got the video. The folks who are listening to Bristol Warren, or if you're not from Bristol Warren, go to the Around Town page or the Coalition page, and we've got that great little video. It's only about 4 minutes long, but if it doesn't choke you up a little bit, and if it doesn't give you a bit of a throwback to when you were a tot and you were 7 or 8 years old, and that school that you walk into now for a meeting and you don't even think of looks so big. and look so insurmountable, and all those challenges. Maybe we don't remember our first day of school, but we all remember grammar school and high school. It's thank your bus driver, thank your monitor, and when you see them in the community, and carry them in your heart as well as all the folks who work so hard to serve us. So the video is all over the place right now. If they won't share it, we will. And if, by the way, if other districts have done similar videos, we'd love to see them. We'd love to share them. Rhode Island needs to know the type of relationships that are in place between school workers and the kids who spend so many important days there. So, Nick, thanks again. Please keep us in the loop on this. It's something we care a lot about, and we wish you nothing but success advocating for your folks.
Thank you so much, Pat. I appreciate it, and I'll definitely keep you informed.
All right.
It's always good to talk to you.
All right, buddy. We'll have you on again soon. Keep us in the loop. Folks, we're going to take a break now for the evening. If we are the Coalition, loud and proud, outrage porn-free, civilly disobedient media broadcasting live on the Worldwide Coalition Radio Network here at coalitionradionetwork.com, facebook.com/the Coalition Radio, on the mighty Twitter at Coalition_radio. You know, if you have a moment, if you could like us or share us, we'd be grateful. There's so many great independent media sources here in the state rising up to fill the vacuum of the mainstream media. The way we get our message out, doesn't cost you anything but a moment, is to actually give us those shares and likes. We'd be grateful. Best of luck to folks in Bristol Warren. Anyone who knows this shows know that we're going to be focusing like a laser, if you will, on what goes on in that district on a day-to-day basis. And we'll certainly be in touch with more information tomorrow. Have a wonderful evening.
Thanks, Pat.